In the 11th contact, on the 15th of April 1975, again in mid-afternoon, Meyer is criticized once more for moving too slowly in getting his mission, for which he has been so carefully prepared over such a long time, into motion. He is advised that he needs support and that he should get his friends more involved and organize them into a group effort. When he complains of a lack of resources for such undertakings, he is reminded how they saved his life in the desert of Africa when he was totally without resources, that his training included helping him find resources where they were scarce. After more discussion, Meyer remembered something and asked Semyasi about a new sighting observed from his home. Meyer says, "What was it in the evening of the 20th of March at 1930 hours, which is 7:30 p.m. My children and my wife had called me to the window because they saw within only about a kilometer of distance an object of reddish or yellowish colors flying from north to south. Several neighbors had seen this from the street too and wondered about it. Semyasi said, 'This was none of us either, but the event is known to me. It treats of a beam ship of a race known to us, from a neighboring system to our home planets. It treats of peace-minded beings who, for the sake of expedition, travel through space and to other worlds. Especially the Earth interests them, and so their shining beam ships are frequently seen. Their technologies are not yet as developed as ours, and the creatures are as well rather unconcerned whether they are seen or not.'" Whoa. Meyer asks, "What sort of beings or characters are they?" Semyasi says, "They are human forms. And what is more important is that they are peace-minded and in contact with us, which unfortunately cannot be said about all who cross through the universe." The 12th contact occurred at 15:11 in the afternoon on the 20th of April 1975, that's almost a quarter after 3, and this event occurred only half an hour after a photo demonstration. Meyer had taken pictures of some friends at this site a little earlier in the day, and now in the excitement of another flight demonstration and trying to get as many photos as possible, it appears that he had inadvertently reloaded the film with the pictures of the people on it into his camera and shot photos of the spacecraft on top of the others in what appears to be a series of double exposures. What a pity. When Meyer got the developed slides back and had them printed, he was sure that the Pleiadians had posed their ship over the heads of the people. But in a computer we were able to separate the two pictures into their separate parts, and they looked to be double exposures. If they were double exposures, the film frames matched together quite closely, which seems to be something very difficult to do, if not purely by accident. Semyasi asked for the slides for study and did not bring them back. She criticized Meyer for trying to get people and the spacecraft in the same picture, though, saying that such photos may not be good for certain of those concerned. Meyer had brought small boxes and padding, as he had been instructed to do, and Semyasi gave him some extraterrestrial mineral specimens she had promised, telling him what each was so he could make notes to later identify the specimens. While they were doing this, Meyer observed that the Pleiades is a so-called open star cluster in Taurus. Aldebaran is in Taurus. And asked how many stars they had there in that group. Semyasi answered, "Some 254. Enormous area. Can you imagine the nearest 254 stars to the sun? Wow." Meyer came back to the landing site the following day to examine the tracks and noticed that an army team was searching the same area and taking samples. They had the landing place marked on their map. He pretended not to be involved and got on his moped and rode away. The 13th contact at 17:20, which is 5:20 in the afternoon, on the 25th of April 1975, was a short one. Semyasi said, "The time today is by regret very scarce. Thus we can only discuss the most important things. For the first, I will bring back the loaned book, about which I don't need to express myself more. I refer to the judgment which I have given you in my last contact. My views have not changed. And Meyer said, I will convey your answer to my friend, and on his behalf I also thank you for your trouble. Samyasi, it's not worth mentioning, and on the other hand I'm very delighted that your friend wanted my judgment of this book. If all your friends were as reasonable, confident, and friendly as he, then everything would run better with your mission. I'm delighted about your other two friends, though they are some ponderous and objective. This matter is only their thinking, which they first have to educate toward new objectives and new recognitions. Still, I can assure them of finding their endeavors, their perceptive faculties, and their will being remarkable. About the other persons in the group, I have already spoken in our last meeting, and I do not want to come to that again. If this is the final draft of this book, it was not proofread. Sentences beginning without a capital letter, many mistakes, and we're translating from German probably to English, and whoever did the translation really does not have a very good command of English. I think Wendell Stevens had a duty, if he's going to put out a book, to go through each sentence carefully. It is a very important book, and he treated it as if it was a write-up for the Army. Same style. Sloppy, careless, CIA-ish. On the other hand, because the CIA and the Army have such sloppy styles, it's pretty easy to identify them. So you take the good with the bad. I don't mean Army, I mean Air Force. Wendell Stevens was in the Air Force. Back to the script. The decision is done in this respect, by which it is sufficient. But their whole mind is not well for our undertaking. So I have wondered whether I should destroy the film which you exposed on Sunday morning of the 20th at 10 o'clock, in which they were photographed. I have decided to destroy the film, as was me. I think what she means is, I have decided to destroy the film because it contained pictures of people, and if those pictures were of me, I would destroy the film. Your closer friends should not be disappointed for that. As in the tomorrow day, I want to give you one more chance during the afternoon to photograph further pictures. I have but to settle the destination, no disturbing factors there being allowed, such as the mentioned persons represent. Hard to read because it's weird. Now here's a typo because Samyasi should not be in bold text here. It's not her dialogue, it's his, and he's using her name. Meyer says, of course I observe your decision, Samyasi, though I pity the destruction of the film. That you offer one more chance for such photographing makes it acceptable again. What now still interests me is another matter. More and there I can observe UFOs, which according to their forms do not belong to you. Strange sentence. In most cases the objects are but so very far away that one cannot see more details, or even photograph them, which doing would be very interesting for comparison. Can I do anything in this respect to get sometime a chance for photographing? Look at how they split up the word photographing. Sloppy. The second question concerns the crystals you have brought me. My friend F.L. was delighted with the green malachite stones. He now asks you whether you could bring him a still greater piece of this same sort of mineral. These guys were holding something worth millions of dollars. If they had told people that these malachite stones came from other planets, the bidding price on those would be in the millions of dollars because of the rarity of them. And they probably sold them for a few dollars. And the people receiving them had no idea they came from other planets in other star systems. The cost of those flights would make those stones worth trillions of dollars. They could have easily gotten millions of dollars for them. And these clowns are asking for still bigger pieces? A gram of the material would be worth $100. The scientific value of having something from another planet, the rarity of such a thing. Meyer is not a businessman, that's for sure. And his suffering and penury was totally unnecessary. based on what he had. Why didn't Semyasi say, we have studied the value of things in your society, and because of the rarity and the association of UFOs, of these minerals, we find that these are worth millions of dollars, and that you should offer them as such. And there might be some scientific way to prove that these could not have come from Earth because of the chemical makeup. There might even have been metals that we don't have. I've heard of craft being made of metals that we don't have on Earth. And that testimony came from Errol in Alien Interview. I read the whole book on this channel. So I'm sure there's a way to prove scientifically that these minerals did not originate from Earth, and that the place where they did originate on does not resemble Earth or the moon, because we didn't have stones from anywhere else. We didn't have stones from Mars. Well, actually we did. There were some stones in the Arctic that came from Mars, but we don't have much of that sample. The people who have traveled the other planets are not going to tell anybody about it. They're going to keep that a secret. I want to return to the script now. Semyasi says, I regard it very interesting that you pass over the destruction of the film so easily, which is just not your character, because I know very well how much you can become excited if anything does not run as you desire. So she's hinting that he's a bit neurotic. Then she says, you pose a riddle in this respect, but you also honor me that you simply accept my decision. Very good, girl. Concerning the strange UFO that you want to expose for a comparison, I myself can do nothing, unfortunately. She has no pictures of those UFOs? Come on. She doesn't want to expose those pictures? She's afraid that our people might shoot them down? Well, okay, possibly. Then she recommends you well might influence them with your thought, concentrated on their flight and light mission, but not in a way that you could command them to come near enough to capture them on film. From my side, I have only a possibility to do so, so I will do this if I have a chance and call you. So she's telling him, I'm not that interested in putting you two together. But aliens are telepathic, and as soon as she thought the idea, those other creatures heard it. Those other creatures came here to study Earth and the inhabitants, perhaps, and maybe the society, and maybe they came here to see the Agarthans in the inner Earth. We are not the main event here. The Agarthans are. They're already fifth-dimensional creatures. Maybe she knows that they're not interested in us, that they have a duty to stick to what their objectives are, and she doesn't want to interfere with that, any more than if you were in medical school and you knew that a fellow student was working on an important experiment, you wouldn't want to disturb that experiment in any way or influence him, because it's a scientific endeavor, and these outside influences can bias the experiment and can confound the results. So she also does not have much interest, but Meyer is intensely interested in these other creatures, and I don't blame him. I too would like to know, what are they like? What kind of ships do they fly in? What's their propulsion system? Do they speak language, or do they communicate telepathically? Do they have 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose, and a mouth? Do they have a heart that beats? What's their internal organs systems like? Thousands of questions. Back to the script. Of course, I would like to bring a piece of the malachite stone to your friend F.L., but this should not become a habit, as I have agreed in general bringing stones and crystals when they are destined for your collection's purpose or for the selling of them. But for your 3 closest friends, I will make an exception. However, they will have to be patient, because it will be some weeks before I can provide such things again. She has to travel to faraway planets to get these things. Amazing. Amazing, her patience. In respect to your lectures concerning our mission about needing more photos, we have conciliated. So I can tell you the decision, that we agree to your making still some dozens of diaphotos, whatever that is, of my ship. I think that means video. This contrary to my former decision. We come to that from the opinion that a certain number of pictures of this kind are useful for the matter and are worth it. Nevertheless, we want to limit the pictures to an amount of 100, which surely should be enough. Well, since she limited the number to 100, I don't think that's video. Next card. Editor's comment. There is no little confusion over the pictures taken at Ravensbull at 10 o'clock in the morning on the 20th of April, when Meyer snapped a number of pictures of several group members standing upon a rise and looking out over the valley. A little after 2:30 in the afternoon, that same afternoon he snapped color photographs of a flight demonstration of the spacecraft in the same general vicinity. When he got the slides back from developing, he was surprised to discover many frames with an image of the spacecraft above the heads of the group of friends. I thought we already covered that. I'm confused. Now here's a misspelled word, Pleiades. At that point he was sure that the Pleiadians had actually been in those pictures, but invisible to him and the group. In small slide form, they looked pretty much like Meyer might be right. The first direct printing from slides to prints was on the lighter side, and they still looked pretty much the same. In a later, denser printing, it became possible to see two separate horizon lines. When these prints were introduced into a good computer, it was possible to separate the images into their separate pictures. We can only conclude that Meyer is mistaken here and had lost count on the film frames he had exposed at 10 o'clock and confused some frames with those exposed at 2:40 in the afternoon without witnesses. If this work was proofread carefully, all this confusion would have been ironed out, but it leaves the reader very confused. Returning to the script now. It is entirely possible that Semjase destroyed some of the film with the error pictures, as she said, because at that time Mr. Meyer did not have the best of control over his photos and films. He may have had a partial roll of pictures of the people from the morning photos in his camera at the end of the morning picture-taking session, and rolled it back into the film cartridge when he removed the film from his camera. Okay, so what's all the concern about? Either the photos are double exposures or they're not. Someone has to make a decision. If you see two horizons in the picture, just forget about them. Why spend so much time in a book telling us about double exposed pictures? What's the point? Back to the script. Putting it with his unused film to be finished later, he may have, in the excitement of his hurried snapshots of the flight demonstration that afternoon, unknowingly loaded it into the camera and started again with frame number 1, forgetting that he had some pictures already on the beginning of the film, or even possibly thinking he had a fresh roll with no used frames and simply shot the whole roll over again, or he may have knowingly loaded it again with the intention of advancing the film past the earlier exposures with the people to new frames and just forgot to do so, either of which have double exposed that first frame and all subsequent pictures up to the first unexposed frame, after which the UFO pictures would have continued without the people below it. This is just about what I saw when I looked at this series before some losses there. Okay, we're covering all the would have, should haves, and could haves, and it's a waste of time. The pictures obviously were double exposed. We don't know how it happened. We don't care. Semjase is accusing Billy of purposely double exposing them. I doubt very much that he did that. So what is going on with this alien intelligence? They're smart enough to fly across the universe, and yet they can't figure out his motives? They read minds and they don't know what he's thinking? What is going on here? Billy Meyer is not deceptive and clever like this. When you shoot a roll of film, you don't pull it out halfway through and roll it back. Who does that? When a roll of film is shot, nobody rewinds the film. So why does Wendell Stevens spend all this time confusing us, guessing about the method by which these pictures were double exposed? If there's a point to all of this, I'm not getting it. How about you people? No wonder this chapter is 238 cards long. But it does give us a little bit of insight into how these people think, everyone, and the fights that they had. Back to the script. In this case, the double exposures would have to be the first frames on the roll, and all with the lower edge numbers. Unfortunately, nearly all of the original diapositives have been lost, and we have been unable to locate those originals for possible verification. Okay. Is there a point to all this? Back to the script. Of course we are only guessing here because we simply do not know, and Mr. Meyer is no longer certain, but does not accept our double exposure argument, preferring his own understanding. Well, I have to agree with Billy Meyer here. If there are two horizons, it might be possible that he moved the camera while taking the picture. He might have had the shutter speed too slow and moved the camera. Who knows? And why should we care? Now the script says, continuing now the talk between Semjase and Meyer. Meyer says, I am delightfully surprised, Semjase, thanks very much. Semjase says, your thanks is not necessary. Meyer says, nevertheless, I am delighted. But now still one question, does there exist the possibility, and Semjase interrupts him and says, regretfully I must interrupt you. As I have said, my time is very limited today. Meyer says, I have a very short question. Semjase says, if so, please ask. Meyer asks, is there the possibility that you could bring from your home planet or from any other worlds some pictures anytime, or that I can give you my camera by which then you get pictures? Semjase says, this I have to deny, unfortunately, because such would go too far. Besides the crystals and stones, we have to limit ourselves to the things of Earth. Oh, so she wants to give him crystals and stones from Earth. I thought they were from other planets. Meyer says, thank you, Semjase. This suffices for me. But I have just now remembered having been on the 21st of April, the day after our last meeting again at Ravensbull, having observed militaries there searching the whole environment. Have you noticed anything of this matter? Semjase says, this is a further question, but I know nothing of that event. It might well be possible someone having observed the departure of my ship and having announced this to the authorities or to the army, which now and then happens, unfortunately, after which a search is performed. This happens when we are not careful enough, or when less careful strange ships appear and even land. As you know, we do take precautions in every respect to prevent such occurrences. Though all caution is not enough, because often there are observing eyes where we do not assume them to be, even at so late a time of the night. This may unfortunately then lead to unpleasant incidents, especially when we fly several times to the concerned place or have to touch down there. Especially authorities and the army feel themselves menaced in their power when they are informed of sightings and landings of beam ships, which are beyond their ability to control. Although we are not interested in upsetting or menacing their primitive force, as this mission is obligated alone to Earth human beings. Though they are very much interested in our ships and carry out research and examinations, the authorities and the army deny these facts very strongly. All information in this respect, concerning spaceships, sightings, touchdowns, etc., are much denied by them, as well as their highly secret researches and examinations of beam ship landing places, etc. So do not worry about the military you have met at Ravensbull, because their investigations are secret anyway, and they hide themselves behind untruths about what they do. They will contest in every respect your observations, even if you demonstrated with photographs, which matter could be dangerous for you, as you know already from your own experience. So do not worry about the machinations of the army, as this could otherwise become dangerous for our matter. The 14th contact at 1400, which is 2 o'clock, on the 29th of April 1975, was called by Meyer, where the crystals were discussed, and a criticism of some archaic laws still on the books took place, with an observation that most man-made laws were outside of human dignity and beyond reason. The discussion then turned to group members until Semyasi interrupted with a warning that a vehicle was approaching, a tractor, and that she must leave immediately to avoid arousing suspicion. She departed immediately. The 15th contact, only 2 days later on May 1st, 1975 at almost 4 in the afternoon, was urgently called by Semyasi, and the opening conversation was as follows. Semyasi says, "I have called you so urgently because I have to talk to you about very important things. So listen carefully so that no misunderstanding should arise." And Meyer says, "Just speak, Semyasi. As usual, I am all ears while you talk. I can, at least, catch my breath, for you have hunted me through very much landscape. Uphill, downhill, through thorns and water puddles, I had to run. Why haven't you called me to the Canton Wallace, a very distant county? I think that should be, why have you called me to the Canton Wallace?" Semyasi laughing, "I could have commanded you still farther away, but I didn't think it necessary. It was important to order you here because we are fully undisturbed, while in the surroundings closer to your home, many humans are taking excursions." Semyasi explained some events observed and sought to redress some misjudgment on her part. Ooh, they made a mistake. Aliens are fallible. Semyasi, "I have to confess to having made some mistakes which have brought me to wrong conclusions. Yet I don't want to exclude that you came in the same way to wrong decisions as I. At all ends we are human beings, even when come from different stars and spiritual positions, being fundamentally like-minded creatures who have to go the way of their own evolution. This then does not exclude my making mistakes, which I ask your friends and acquaintances to understand. We really are not creatures of perfection, as some would like to label us. If such things happen under me, then I do call them, because it would make no sense for me to hide or contest them. Such would only work to my own disadvantage. Now I want to explain about the help which I promised to your group, in which I will have to ask you to evaluate such assistance as well as other. No persons not being group members should be initiated into these things. To all of those I suggest you keep silence about some things. So I want to direct in your interest that you hand over to certain persons contact reports and photos, but no photo negatives, films, or diapositives. You also should hand over crystals and minerals only to members of the group or to other secure persons, but never to strangers to your group. You may perform film and slide lectures, but be careful of the lecture materials. There exist those who would like to seize possession of the materials at your disposal, and who even do not neglect intrigues for this purpose. In this be very cautious, for we cannot interfere if you should cause difficulties for yourself." After a short discussion of image projections and related phenomena, and a description of an experiment she offered to demonstrate at another time, she brought this meeting to a close. And Semyasi says, "But now again the time has come that we have to say goodbye. But I myself will call you again after a short while, because there are other matters to be cleared." And then Meyer says sarcastically, "But call me then to China or Chihuahua, Mexico, as those places are nearer than this place." And then Semyasi, even more sarcastic, says, "May it also be the South or North Pole?" And Meyer says, "As you desire, Semyasi, only there it is a bit cold, which I don't like much." So he lives in Switzerland? In the mountains? The 16th contact came only 2 days later. Took him 2 days to get back home. In the form of a thought transmission in which the Pleiadian visitor confessed some inattention on their and Meyer's part during a recent photo demonstration when she was concentrating on positioning the ship, and he was overly concerned with the operation of the camera, thus escaping the detection of both. Some people who observed the demonstration and the filming and became astonished by the performance. Some of these followed Meyer, still being unnoticed by him, and made inquiries about him. 3 of these undertook steps to expose Meyer's activities in certain places, one of these being the place where the spacecraft circled a weather pine for comparison purposes during the filming. They had decided to eliminate that tree, which was one of the reasons for this contact, and the Pleiadian warned that they must be more careful in the future in such matters. One of the reasons for picking the remote contact sites, she cautioned that the landing places must remain secret, which must also be understood by the group around Meyer. Now, eliminating that tree, I believe that's the story whereby the ship caused radiation damage to the tree, and they could not repair the damage, and so they moved the tree by going back in time and moving it when it was a seedling. And everybody in the neighborhood remembers it growing up in the new place, and Meyer still remembers it growing up in the old place, and he asked the neighbors about that, and they think he's crazy, because the tree has always been in the new place, because they went back in time and changed it. So I don't know if this reference to that tree is the same tree, or if they would actually eliminate a living thing like that. I doubt that they would kill a tree. I think it's probably the same tree. But now the story changes, and it's not radiation damage, but somebody who's spying on Billy Meyer takes samples from that tree or something, and that's the reason why they eliminate that tree from that location. So I don't know what's going on, but maybe it will unfold later. The 17th contact was another face-to-face meeting at almost 3 o'clock in the morning on May 9th, 1975. You know, this word ME could mean so many different things, and I really don't understand who did this translation or why Wendell Stevens did not think it was necessary or important to put out a book with so many errors. On the 9th of Me, 1975, sometimes the word me means I never read a sloppier book than this. Meyer waited a long time at the appointed contact point and was about to give up. So when he finally gets face to face with Semyasi, he says, "You let me wait a very long time here for this contact." And then Semyasi says, "I'm going to try to figure out what this means. This has come about because of our inattentiveness and because of your film and photographic labors." What does that mean? Different problems have arisen. We had to regulate and neutralize them first. To prevent further such events, we have settled an order that for the next while you ought not to make any more photographs or films. Do you understand that? I don't. On the other hand, the material you have is sufficient for you. Meyer, I regret that, but you seem to be dramatizing the matter, which is a strange view of you for me. Semyasi, the whole matter is much more earnest than you seem to assume. Not without purpose I had to eliminate forms of life. Okay, so she killed the tree. It's not the same tree then. Such concerns under the laws of our race admit such eliminations only in case of an emergency. And in that case such emergency was ahead, though it may not appear that way to you. But this you will understand if you know now that the military you watched was indeed active there on the 21st of April because of my beam ship. This we have verified besides other concerns. Your fears and assumptions were correct. But still many other things have occurred in this respect. Thus we had to spend much time these last few days removing these difficulties. We needed to find out all those humans from out of the crowds who had reached dangerous cognitions of our activities. In all of these we were forced to eliminate their memories, in this respect to avoid harm of any kind. I know that the confusions and troubles have been serious, and I dramatize them in no way. I also understand that for some while I cannot allow any more photographs, films, etc., and this by longer sight, whatever that means. Instead, I will allow you to capture other things onto your films. But there is still some time, and you have to be patient. Semyasi then answered a number of Meyer's questions, to a point where Meyer felt he had to bring the meeting to a close and get home. An interesting sidelight on that is offered in the closing exchange of dialogue. Meyer says, "I understand completely, and I am well satisfied with what you gave. But for today this may be sufficient, because I have to go home again into my bed." Sannyasi apologetically says, I regret having to tear you out of your sleep, and you must be still tired because of it. Meyer says, of course I am, and besides I'm freezing, and in spite of the warm days the nights are still cold. But the real cause is my wife, as I left without waking and informing her. If she suddenly wakes and I'm not there, then she will be afraid. Thus I have to go home again and lay in the bed like nothing happened. Now, you know that Billy Meyer and his wife divorced, and you know that she said that he made up all this stuff about the aliens. And that was a pretty low-down thing for her to do after what the two of them went through. Him leaving at 3 o'clock in the morning like this, and him being concerned about his wife and his family and their worrying. She knew very well that he was meeting with aliens. She saw the ships come in. She saw all the photographs. She heard all the conversations. And so for a woman to turn on her husband at a time of divorce is what so many women do. They get really nasty and they want to hurt you any way they can. And so she said it was all a hoax. And when you read this story and you see these details about their marriage and his activities and his struggle to survive, you have to give him credit for what he went through and what he achieved, and his mission and the purpose of all of this to bring this truth to us and to spare this planet the war that's going to blow it up like Maldek. And you have to look at his wife as someone who did a disservice to mankind just because she wanted to injure her husband at time of divorce. And I'd like to ask her a question. Which is more important to you? Human survival or revenge? Because if you chose revenge, as it appears that you have, then you sold out humanity just for the pleasure of revenge. Let's continue. The 18th contact on the 15th of May, oh, they spelled it right this time, 1975, beginning at 21:34. Now, let's see, you subtract 12. Is that 9:34? In the evening, offered a most profound discussion of the nature of spirit, and underscored the need for Meyer's mission now. It is considered so important that the whole opening discourse is reported here. Sannyasi opens by saying, before today, we were discussing other things, but today, I want to continue with the discussion of spirit. A person may react to the word or the designation creation in different ways, as though it were something apart and beautiful or good. Such is not exactly the case. Such characterizations as omnipresent, all-powerful, all-knowing are valid characterizations of the very nature of creation. Millions of religious humans do not understand the true nature of the creation. Whenever they speak of it, they tend to personify it as a God being, which is then itself a separation from the creation. And they confuse the idea of the creation. So it is very important to know as much as possible about the character and the nature of the creation. For when the word is understood properly, it buoys the inner mind and connects it to its source as soon as the word is heard. How do you do that? In another context, the creation was described as the sum of all that is manifest and unmanifest, the matter realm being only a very small part, and that all that is the creation experience its polarization, which produces the created and its experience, all of which continuously adds to the total experience of the creation for further application in that which is created. In other words, it is us and works through us, and we are it. There is no separate personification indicated, except as some part chooses to represent itself as such, which any part can do within its own level of concept. So, in other words, there is no God, and personifying creation as a God is okay, but that we can all be gods. That's what this says. There is no separate personification indicated. There is no God, except as some part chooses to represent itself as such. So God can represent himself as such, or we can represent ourselves as creation. And any part of creation can do this within its own level of concept. Yes, Sannyasi, you're right. We don't understand the creation. And religion certainly doesn't explain it for us. It gives us a belief that God is a person, and the creation is clearly not a person. It's creation, which includes us. Okay, so we're struggling to understand the creation. That's what she's saying. That's what the author is saying. And if the listener understands these sentences in any other way, please set up a YouTube and explain it, because we're all dying to hear it. The experience reveals the creation as unlimited beauty, harmony, wisdom, knowledge, and truth, enduring endlessly. Whenever a human perceives a thing of beauty, a flower, an animal, clouds, water, landscape, music, color, etc., he or she considers it in connection with the limitless grandeur of the creation itself. When a human recognizes and realizes this, then he or she knows that this recognition springs from limitless cognition, which itself is the creation. Wherever life moves, even inside the tiniest creatures, like a microbe, one sees the limitless creation. What is the purpose? What is the point of all of this? Why do we have to go through these experiences? Next card. The creation is inside of every human being and every other creature and thing, being a fraction of that manifestation itself. Once this thought has penetrated deeply inside a person, and he or she can experience it, one loses all fear and doubt. When one knows one's contact with the all-knowing, almighty creation, one enjoys peace and tranquility. I had a near-death experience, and I was scared to death. I saw the white light, and I headed towards the moon, and it was frightening for me at 10 years old. I didn't see this tranquility. I didn't feel this peace or tranquility. I just felt terror. Back to the script. Reflection on this gives the name creation great meaning. The more one meditates in this reality, the more his or her intelligence is illuminated, and the more powerful his personality becomes, and his whole life and labor is blessed. The creation rises in his consciousness, and he senses peace, strength, knowledge, wisdom, delight, and hope. Well, there was a change in those who meditate, and peace is what I seem. Calm, relaxation. But I think anybody who concentrates on clearing their mind will achieve the same, because life fills your mind with clutter and confusion and panic and desperation, especially living under a Nazi system. Continuing now. He can overcome obstacles and achieve his objectives, and suddenly has no more need for purely material things. I disagree. As long as we have a money system, we're all going to need to make money, and that's going to bring out the worst in people. They're not doing their labor for love. They're doing their labor so that someone else can tax them and take part of it and be rich from our labor. Back to the script. One must learn a spiritual, intellectual manner of thinking and recognize its validity until the first successes are achieved. But the way does not stop here, because further exploration, research, and development and further recognition leads to the limitless endurance of time. Everything may happen in the course of time to prevent one from achieving his or her objectives. But the spiritualized person knows no limits and does not allow himself or herself to be stopped short of his or her goals by any events of the future. For him, the future always exists in the present, wherefrom he becomes determined to do everything here, and now to obtain the highest spiritual state of consciousness, and he does not fear the future, for the future is now, just as present as the present itself. No, I disagree. I don't think the future is now. The future is the future. How can you say the future is now? You can affect the future now by doing things now, and the only time you have is now. And you don't have the past, it's just a memory. And you don't have the future because it's not here yet. You have the now, and you must act now in order to affect the future and create a pleasant past. So this is mumbo-jumbo garbage coming from an alien. And the last sentence, when the spiritualized being sees others before him, he sees the creational in them. No, what I see in the Illuminati and those who control us, the Committee of 300 who want to murder us, I see evil. I don't see them as any part of creation. I see them as pure evil. And the power corrupted them. And we need to break down that power so they don't have nearly as much of it. And then they'll be much less corrupt. And the job to do is to reverse the concentration of power and disperse it. And when the number of governments in the world equals the number of people in the world, we're going to have peace. Because each person will be his own president. And he will decide what the future will be, not someone on a committee of 300. The conversation continues, and Meyer says, "What you are saying sounds so understandable and logical." Oh? Oh? If only humans could comprehend it. Well, what are you, Meyer? You are human. You understand it? What do you think, that her words are understandable by you and not by us? I don't understand what she's saying. I think it's mumbo-jumbo. And I think Wendell Stevens did a sloppy job in proofreading this book. The ideas are not clear. I do not understand any more about the creation except that religion is bogus and that they're saying there is no God. It's not a person. The creation is the creation. Well, what's the purpose of it all? Have the aliens discovered what is the purpose? I come here for answers to the big questions, and I get a bunch of abstract mumbo-jumbo. Semjase says to Billy, "So they will. The humans will understand. But this will not happen tomorrow." Well, that was 1975, and we've had 37 years pass since then. So she says it will not happen tomorrow, nor in the next 37 years. You and your group are only laying the basic stones for an avalanche that will start much later. Much later is an abstract term. How much later? The next line reads, "More discussion of the nature of spirit and even of prayer took place, and then the dialogue took a new and unusual track." Semjase says, "But now I have a question for you." Oh, what great wisdom can we impart to the alien? "You explained that you would develop our matter, about which I still have seen nothing. Have you failed in this respect?" What is she talking about? His dissemination of this truth to the whole world? She gave him lots of photos. She gave him lots of lessons for many years. And now it's time for him to take a microphone and stand before a camera and broadcast to the world the lessons he learned. And she says to him, "But now I have a question for you. You explained that you would develop our matter, about which I still have seen nothing. Have you failed in this respect?" And then Meyer says, "I don't want to call it exactly that, to have failed. As in our last discussion, too many things came up, and I still could not speak thoroughly about the matter. But by the end of this month, everything should be in the right position. In this respect, I already improved the pre-work, which I still have to transmit to the others." And Semjase says, "Then I am calmed, for I wanted to know this matter being regulated before I leave for some time, and will be in contact with you by thought transmission only." And Meyer says, "You mentioned this before. What are you doing that is so important?" Semjase says, "This is destined for your ears only." And then she tells him, and Meyer says, "That is very interesting, and now I understand your secrecy." God, tell us! I'm dying to know. The reference was to some activities being carried out by some other extraterrestrial beings from a planet and a constellation our astronomers call Reticulum. Ooh, they gave us an idea about that. How about it? Semjase says, "It is well that way because there is much connected with it, but now I have a proposal for your group, before I do go away for a longer time, to turn their attention once more to my ship. At a given time, which for certain reasons I do not want to announce in advance, I will again give your group the chance to see my beam ship. Regarding this, I have again chosen a time of night, because in the darkness everything can be better observed. I will demonstrate for them the possibilities of the different energies, which in the darkness can be well seen for their light effects. Some kinds of energy I can only use high in the atmosphere to avoid deadly effects on Earth forms of life. Nevertheless, this will be an unforgettable show for your group members observing the demonstration, as well as for any other casual observers, because I will exercise no protective means against sight. Wow. Is it radiation? And why would they use that? And what happened to all these people who saw this? There were 25 people living at that compound. Did she allow all 25 to see it? Why have we never read one word from these other people? The testimony to corroborate Billy Meyer's story and deny the ex-wife her pleasure in seeking revenge against Billy. Why haven't those witnesses become disciples to spread this truth? These are things I wonder about. You are requested to take necessary action, to observe protection needed, as well as to be sure that no others besides yourself come any closer to my ship than 910 meters, because they could be harmed. You I will protect and screen in this respect, so that you suffer no harm. The rest, the hell with them. Why did she say that? Why doesn't she just protect all of them? She says, at this action it would be of much meaning and worth for yourself and your group, and for our whole mission too, if you would take with you some uninitiated observers who work with public organs and in offices having decisive influences. Oh, why don't we invite the president's cabinet out? But take care that these persons be suited for our matter, and not be detractors seeking to disrupt. In consequence, be very careful. Select those persons carefully, but don't initiate them by any means into how and why of the undertaking, but only explain it as dealing with an interesting matter which they will witness. Arrange for these persons according to written clarification, because this will be of importance later. Meyer says, you suddenly go very far, Samyasi, as I consider that hitherto you were very eager to protect yourself and your ship at every circumstance. I agree. Sometimes these Pleiadians are weird. They don't think straight. They're inconsistent, like us. Yet, they travel the galaxies. I'd love to catch up with them. Samyasi says, it will be a unique one-time demonstration, which I will not repeat again, but this demonstration has become necessary to underpin your whole coming work for your group. We don't want to give your group only reports and objectives, but as well to help them to be of service to you when such is demanded, suitable, and necessary in our view. Meyer says, that's but really nevertheless very much. In fact, more than I ever expected. I don't know what he means. The sentence is not clear. Samyasi says, I know, but now to other matters, being destined for you and me alone. Much of this restricted information was never intended for anyone other than Meyer, and was only imparted to him for his own better understanding of the mission. Those parts of these messages may never be released. This contact initiated another spectacular first in the annals of the contemporary UFO phenomenon. These extraterrestrials had this time not only announced their appearance in advance, but they now invited the observers to bring outside witnesses and even information media people to witness a demonstration to be put on by the UFO nauts. Others of Meyer's group of friends witnessed such demonstrations also earlier and later, such as Jacobus Bertschinger with Meyer on the 14th of March, 1976. Hans Schulzbach on the 23rd of April, 1976. Wolfgang Witzer on the 6th of June, 1976. Okay, I had queried about the witnesses, and now at least we have some names, so I'm satisfied. All reported in the preliminary investigation report on the case. On Saturday, the 12th of June, 1976, another whole group, again including some outsiders, with 4 35mm still cameras and 1 8mm movie camera, observed and photographed together and simultaneously from different vantage points, and even more astounding flight demonstration put on by the extraterrestrials. This is reported also with samples of the photographs in the reference indicated. This has never been heard of before or since, and the flight demonstrations were such at all altitudes and all parts of the sky that pyrotechnics was completely out of the question. There was no way one man or even a team of men without real spacecraft could have staged the displays witnessed, and still you have some who don't believe it. They see piles of bodies at the end of World War II, and they deny the Holocaust, as if all those videos were faked, bulldozers pushing piles of bodies into a hole. It was during an earlier demonstration for Meyer and his group on the 3rd of April 1976 that they were pursued by unwelcome observers with direction-finding equipment on top of their cars. They had located Meyer in the woods, evidently through an informer or by bugging his motorbike, and were closing in on him when Semjase warned of their approach and where they were. Meyer was forced to take a different route out of the forest and crashed into a ditch on his moped, fracturing a rib and dislocating his shoulder, in addition to abrasions and mud all over him. Semjase, before departing from the scene of the demonstration, which included 5 ships that night, arrived with a small apparatus that she applied to Meyer's rib area. When she did this, he felt an electrical sensation and the rib was healed. She said because she had not brought the right instrument, she could not do much for his shoulder or his twisted foot. After that treatment and some distraction of the pursuers by the extraterrestrials, Meyer made his way out of the forest by another route and arrived home alone, muddy, wet, and bruised, but not seriously injured. No broken rib. The 19th contact at 2:09 in the afternoon, on the 16th of May 1975, was a thought transmission in which Semjase gave Meyer a rundown on FO, who was trying to contact him. He then decided not to be available. The 20th contact was called by Meyer to get some answers for himself. It took place on the 20th of May, 1975. Meyer said, "I tried different ways in the last few days to make contact with you, but failed completely. I have some important personal concerns which I wanted to discuss with you." Semjase said, "I have recognized your attempts, but for certain reasons I did not arrange myself for them. You have first to come to certain understandings yourself." Meyer said, "Exactly about that do I want to talk to you. First, I had a strange experience after our last contact, just a few hours later. Besides my closest friend, I have not mentioned this to anyone, because I first want to be clear about this. And because of this, I want to ask you whether you have intrigued anything in respect to my strange experience. I do not know what I should think of it." Semjase said, "You are very cautious and scarcely express yourself. So you evidently want to know what child of truth I am." What does that mean? Meyer, "You are wise." Semjase, "Also you honor me. It may indeed be traced back to me, if this answer suffices." What does that mean? Meyer says, "It suffices as far as my assumption, but I want you to let the cat out of the bag. Spill the beans. Show what you know. Lay it on me." And Semjase says, "You likely mean that I should give you more information." Right! "This you shall get. Our High Council has considered you mature enough for contact with a higher form of spirit, which has passed beyond the rebirth and reincarnation cycles." Ooh. 5th dimension, 6th dimension, 7th dimension? Because of this, we have informed the creature of that spiritual dimension and sphere who has, that word is probably started, who have started communication with you. They have stared, but I don't think that's correct. This creature has started communication with you. Thus, try for higher concentration and a faculty of acceptance to fulfill the task. It will be difficult and time-consuming. What does that mean? Meyer says, "You have fun with me, because from where shall I take all this time to dedicate myself to still more such kind of things. I do also have to care for the livelihood of my family. How shall I do this then? You would think that the lady could create a whole bunch of fruits and vegetables that he could sell to get money. They have devices that can heal a rib. Doesn't she have a device that can turn energy into a bushel of apples so he can sell them? Does Samyasi understand the concept of money? There are many forms of money. A bushel of apples is real money, not fiat currency. She doesn't have to counterfeit the currency. She could produce a bushel of apples. Who's going to question a bushel of apples? If she produces gold, they keep track of it, and you have to tell them where you got the gold. But a bushel of apples can be turned into liquid currency quickly. I don't understand these Pleiadians. Samyasi says, this problem is known to me, but she has no solution. And also, I know that your added work will consume much time, many months and years even. Meyer says, but I won't be able to survive that long. How else shall I live and still be able to take care of my family? His wife is going to leave him. Samyasi says, the time will be difficult for you and your family, but it will be worthwhile time. Just create the apples and let the guy go. You want to bring your fellow creatures help and show them truth, in consequence of which you also take need and misery a short time upon yourself? No goals are achieved without troubles and sacrifices. Remember the real prophets of the past and what they accepted. Yeah, I remember Jesus creating a whole bunch of fish from one or something like that and reproducing the wine. You have the equipment on board your ship. You made breakfast. You created enough water to take a bath, a shower. Just put a little fruit in the basket. Last sentence. They as well were not spared. So she's telling him, just suffer. Why? What's the point? Well, Billy gets a little irritated and says, you have me under delusion with your confounded logic. On the other hand, you evidently imagine that all is very easy for me, but I am not living in any heaven, just simply on the earth. Samyasi says, it will not be as hard as that, so don't get excited. And Meyer says, you can talk easily, for you are not in need of chasing for the money. And Samyasi says, don't worry, for I know that all will not become as bad as you at this moment assume. Meyer says, that's of nonsense and gossip use for me, but there is likely little else for me than to just scoop out of this soup. Must be a Switzerland expression. Samyasi says, I know that you are reasonable, because the welfare of your fellow creatures is established inside of you. Meyer says, this view will likely as well be your logic when I get worked up as a dead body for fertilizer, yes? And Samyasi says, you make harsh and peculiar jokes. Samyasi is basically telling him, we want you to go out there and sell the whole world on this idea, and we want you to do it without an expense account, while the enemy has a lavish expense account and a salary all piled on top of the taxpayer, and they alone share the burden for all of this lavish spending. It's not reasonable for the Pleiadians to come here and expect someone to carry this message to the world without any salary or expenses. He's supposed to do all this for them and for the planet, but not have any remuneration. When they have advanced technology and they could easily give him something he could sell that would not arouse attention, like minerals that are too valuable. You know, cucumbers, squash, tomatoes, bell peppers could be marketed. They have 25 people, each of whom could go to the markets and sell these goods. Instead, there's no income for anybody. So naturally, Meyer wants to quit. He can't handle it anymore. Continuing the reading, when pressed for a name, the new communicator said it could be called Arahat Atharsata. It now began to take up a good deal of the little time Meyer had left over from necessary pursuits, and Meyer was becoming disenchanted and wanted out. He had tried, and it was just not going to work. He called for a meeting, and the 21st contact took place at 2:06 a.m. on the 27th of May, 1975. Meyer said, there has just been a demand for me to see you and talk to you. At home I'm still working and find no calm. The only day I did not get away from the typewriter, writing the message Arahat Atharsada gave me. My wife laid down for sleeping 1 hour ago, and so I can leave undisturbed. I have reflected very thoroughly about what you have told me, but I don't find a way out or how I can manage it all. Everything is consuming too much time. The contacts with you, then the contact reports which you later transmit to me again, and the tasks and demands which I perform for you, and now still the writing of the messages from Arahat Atharsata. All this together is simply very much, and I can no longer earn the livelihood for my family and myself. I already told you once, I live here on the material earth, and not simply someplace in heaven. You evidently imagine it all too easy in respect to our life, which here depends on financial means still. It seems to me if you cross the galaxy in order to undertake an endeavor, that it should be carefully planned. This looks slipshod when you don't consider that Billy Meyer has to earn a living and that he cannot be making meetings at 2 o'clock in the morning and disrupting his whole family to do so, and running the risk that his wife will discover him gone and worry about him. And then when he gets home, he has to provide money, and there isn't any. And she's probably complaining about that because women need to have money to spend, to buy food and stuff. I'm not sure what's going on here, why people would cross the universe and travel such a distance. It takes 7 hours for her to get here, and 7 hours to get back. Couldn't she plant crops some out-of-the-way place and then rush to the future and grab them and take them back to Billy? Sannyasi says, surely I see your hesitations and problems, but all the matters are nevertheless too important to be menaced by sorrows of that kind. Sorrows? Perhaps you are causing yourself too many problems in this respect, for you will find good friends who will assist you in this, like Randall Winters, Wendell Stevens. On the other hand, the spreading of truth always has been connected with problems which should be evident to you. Do once remember all the truth announcers of former times who had to overcome similar problems. Yes, I remember when Jesus overcame the problems. He multiplied the fish and the wine. He cheated. And she says, but why are you expressing thoughts in this direction? Because he can't take it anymore, Sannyasi. Hello? Meyer asks, why? I consider that a peculiar question from you. Does it occur to you that I do have to feed my family and keep it alive? I cannot simply let my wife and children go hungry, and there are other things coming together, creating each month new problems. These are running costs for the house, telephone, electricity, insurance, etc. Sannyasi says, I hadn't considered all this. I hadn't considered all this, because such problems are some strange to us. You came all the way across the galaxy to help us get through this problem, and you forgot that we are a money society? And then she says, under these conditions, it is better if we defer at least some things for a while and continue them in later years. So, that is the end, apparently. Meyer says, that is well and fine, Sannyasi, but you are not considering that I grow older and will not live eternally as a miserable little earth human. The discussion then turned to the possibility of the Pleiadians bringing Meyer crystals to sell to raise money, and the nature of radiations stored in crystals. If this sounds like a pitch for money now, we must remember that when Meyer was making this complaint to the UFO nuts, nobody was reading these notes, and he was, in fact, in dire straits. We have tried to put ourselves in his shoes at that time. He was working as a night watchman when this started, and then very soon the UFO nuts took up so much of his time, both day and night, that he lost his job. Cluster in Taurus. Aldebaran is in Taurus. And asked how many stars they had there in that group. Sannyasi answered, some 254. Enormous area. Can you imagine the nearest 254 stars to the sun? Wow. Meyer came back to the landing site the following day to examine the tracks. and noticed that an army team was searching the same area and taking samples. They had the landing place marked on their map. He pretended not to be involved and got on his moped and rode away. The 13th contact at 17:20, which is 5:20 in the afternoon, on the 25th of April, 1975, was a short one. Semjase said, "The time today is by regret very scarce. Thus we can only discuss the most important things. For the first, I will bring back the loaned book, about which I don't need to express myself more. I refer to the judgment which I have given you in my last contact. My views have not changed." And Meyer said, "I will convey your answer to my friend, and on his behalf I also thank you for your trouble. Semjase, it's not worth mentioning, and on the other hand I'm very delighted that your friend In the 11th contact, on the 15th of April 1975, again in mid-afternoon, Meyer is criticized once more for moving too slowly in getting his mission, for which he has been so carefully prepared over such a long time, into motion. He is advised that he needs support and that he should get his friends more involved and organize them into a group effort. When he complains of a lack of resources for such undertakings, he is reminded how they saved his life in the desert of Africa when he was totally without resources, that his training included helping him find resources where they were scarce. After more discussion, Meyer remembered something and asked Semjase about a new sighting observed from his home. Meyer says, "What was it in the evening of the 20th of March at 19:30 hours, which is 7:30 p.m. My children and my wife had called me to the window because they saw within only about a kilometer of distance an object of reddish or yellowish colors flying from north to south. Several neighbors had seen this from the street too and wondered about it. Semjase said, 'This was none of us either, but the event is known to me. It treats of a beam ship of a race known to us, from a neighboring system to our home planets. It treats of peace-minded beings who, for the sake of expedition, travel through space and to other worlds. Especially the Earth interests them, and so their shining beam ships are frequently seen. Their technologies are not yet as developed as ours, and the creatures are as well rather unconcerned whether they are seen or not.'" Whoa. Meyer asks, "What sort of beings or characters are they?" Semjase says, "They are human forms, and what is more important is that they are peace-minded and in contact with us, which unfortunately cannot be said about all who cross through the universe." The 12th contact occurred at 15:11 in the afternoon on the 20th of April 1975, that's almost a quarter after 3, and this event occurred only half an hour after a photo demonstration. Meyer had taken pictures of some friends at this site a little earlier in the day, and now in the excitement of another flight demonstration and trying to get as many photos as possible, it appears that he had inadvertently reloaded the film with the pictures of the people on it into his camera and shot photos of the spacecraft on top of the others in what appears to be a series of double exposures. What a pity. When Meyer got the developed slides back and had them printed, he was sure that the Pleiadians had posed their ship over the heads of the people. But in a computer we were able to separate the two pictures into their separate parts, and they looked to be double exposures. If they were double exposures, the film frames matched together quite closely, which seems to be something very difficult to do, if not purely by accident. Semjase asked for the slides for study and did not bring them back. She criticized Meyer for trying to get people and the spacecraft in the same picture, though, saying that such photos may not be good for certain of those concerned. Meyer had brought small boxes and padding, as he had been instructed to do, and Semjase gave him some extraterrestrial mineral specimens she had promised, telling him what each was so he could make notes. to later identify the specimens. While they were doing this, Meyer observed that the Pleiades is a so-called open star club and wanted my judgment of this book. If all your friends were as reasonable, confident, and friendly as he, then everything would run better with your mission. I'm delighted about your other two friends, though they are some ponderous and objective. This matter is only their thinking, which they first have to educate toward new objectives and new recognitions. Still, I can assure them of finding their endeavors, their perceptive faculties, and their will being remarkable. About the other persons in the group, I have already spoken in our last meeting, and I do not want to come to that again. If this is the final draft of this book, it was not proofread. Sentences beginning without a capital letter, many mistakes, and we're translating from German probably to English, and whoever did the translation really does not have a very good command of English. I think Wendell Stevens had a duty, if he's going to put out a book, to go through each sentence carefully. It is a very important book, and he treated it as if it was a write-up for the Army. Same style. Sloppy, careless, CIA-ish. On the other hand, because the CIA and the Army have such sloppy styles, it's pretty easy